Election integrity was one of several topics discussed in the first presidential debate. Both candidates discussed the importance of a fair election. However, the president once again used his platform to challenge the integrity of mail-in voting. Here's what he had to say.
As far as the ballots are concerned, it's a disaster. A solicited ballot, okay, solicited is okay. You're soliciting, you're asking, they send it back, you send it back. I did that. If you have an unsolicited, they're sending millions of ballots all over the country. There's fraud. They found them in creeks. They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
Earlier this month, both Facebook and Twitter tagged a similar post for including misinformation about the mail-in voting process. Mail-in voting has historically been a safe and effective method for Americans to cast their ballots during an election. Facebook has recently worked to improve its standing with the American people. Back in 2016, Russia successfully used the platform as part of a disinformation campaign to impact the presidential election. Since then, the social media giant has become the focal point of several intelligence hearings on foreign interference, election meddling, and the spread of unchecked misinformation on the platform. But in recent weeks, Facebook has changed its stance in an effort to beef up security ahead of the 2020 election. The tech giant has not only begun to fight misinformation campaigns and foreign interference, but has also actively played a role in registering new voters and finding Americans across the country to work at polls come Election Day. CNET senior producer Dan Patterson joins me now to discuss. Hi, Dan. Great to see you. So we know that Facebook has had this long-standing position of, quote, not intervening in politics, despite the fact that they are one of the world's largest distributors of political ads. So what made them reverse course now? Did they finally realize that you can't play with fire and not get burned?
Well, Tanya, in a word, pressure on a few different fronts. First, from their competition, their peers. Twitter, more than a year ago, announced a policy where they would label and identify what they call misleading different types of content. So sometimes video, sometimes text posts, and pressure from their own employees. In fact, on June 1st, Facebook employees staged a virtual walkout in protest of some of the content President Trump posted on the platform, and pressure from the public and the media. It's no secret that Facebook has been heavily scrutinized since before 2016, before the election, and right after it, where Mark Zuckerberg kind of dismissed the notion that the platform could be manipulated for political purposes. So Facebook is making these changes because of pressure.
But Dan, so by the time Facebook's October 27th ban on new political ads is in effect, millions of voters are expected to have already submitted their mail-in ballots. So how does Facebook justify this decision to wait before enacting the ban, or is this mainly being done then for the optics?
Well, it's hard to say whether it's being done solely for the optics. And honestly, they haven't said a ton about why they're enacting this policy just before the election, but after people started voting. What they have said is that does give us enough lead time to check political posts. But Tanya, they've been kind of opaque about the decision-making process here.
Right. So Facebook, as you know, Dan, as we've discussed several times, has been a hot button issue for politicians in Washington for years now. Democrats consistently blame the platform for pushing a right-wing agenda on its users. Facebook has denied all of these claims, saying the platform is completely neutral. So is it just algorithms that drive certain amount of traffic to these, conservative posts? And why do they seem to have such a successful presence on the social media platform?
Yeah, Tanya, look, extremists and others are successful on Facebook because they're using the platform like it's designed to be used. Look, private groups allow fairly radical speech, at least hate speech, violent speech, and other forms of problematic content to kind of exist within bubbles. And then, yes, the algorithm, although there are literally thousands of factors that determine what content goes in your news feed or in a group feed, but the algorithm certainly and for social media at large tends to favor engagement. So engagement determined by how not just many likes or shares a post gets, but how long you read it, what you don't read. All of these factor into what the algorithms show you. And it just so happens that particular actors have figured out how to feed types of content. Some are authentic actors. They are real extremists, or even just real people have figured out how to use the algorithms. But other bad actors have figured out the same stuff.
And Dan, speaking of bad actors, last week Facebook took down hundreds of fake accounts and pages that were allegedly tied to the Kremlin. These accounts posed as news outlets and journalists, and they targeted several different countries, including the U.S. What more do we know about the motive behind this particular campaign? And what does this tell us about Russian disinformation campaigns ahead of the election?
Well, Tanya, this tells us a few things. One, that what they did in 2016, which is kind of leverage some of what we were just talking about, the mechanics of social media engagement, to their advantage to do what we might call an influence operation. This was designed to exasperate pre-existing fissures in American politics and culture, like our feelings about race issues or abortion, really sensitive issues. And what we see is that some of those tactics still work. Now, what has evolved is this creation of content. In fact, there are now bots that will auto-generate content for you, but we know that Russia's GRU and IRA had groups that would set up websites, and they would use cloud hosting by American cloud companies to set up websites and load those sites with content that are designed to feed algorithms for engagement. And when you try to adopt the persona of a journalist or a news organization, you're also trying to adopt the credibility of that organization or that journalist. So this is a kind of sneaky tactic that relies on the foundational social engineering and influence operation stuff that Russia did in 2016.
All right. Well, Dan Patterson, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to see you, Tanya.